Hey, seasoners, welcome back to yet another installment of the Travel and Tourism Podcast, my first season. My guest today worked for Club Med from 1987 to 1992 as a picnic and snorkeling G.O. in such Club Med resorts as Paradise Island, Eleuthera, Sandpiper, Turks and Caicos, and Sonora Bay. His first season was in one of my favorite places, Club Med Paradise Island. When he applied for his dream job, his application was sent back to him from Club Med with the note, "Not interested." My guest did not take this lying down, and you will hear what he did to change their mind. After he stopped working for Club Med, he kept going back and has visited over 20 Club Med resorts. From beautiful California, please help me welcome Brian Cargille. Hey, Brian, how are you, sir?
Oh, Greg, I'm just so happy to be here. It's a privilege to be interviewed by you. Thank you.
The honor is all mine. And you know what? If you had not reached out to me, I never would have found you. And guys, it's okay to reach out to Greg Hanna, okay? Because this way, if you reach out to me, you haven't turned me down or rejected me. So thank you, Brian, for doing that. It's very kind of you.
Oh, no, pleasure, pleasure. I love the podcast.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. So you probably know how we do here. We like to go back just a little bit because I'm always interested in people what they did, before Club Med. So since I work in one of two English language universities in Montreal, I was just curious, like, where did you attend school? Did you go to grad school? Can you run that down for me, please?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I did undergrad at UC Irvine, a degree in economics, and then I worked at Club Med for a couple of years before I went back to grad school at Indiana University, and then worked for Club Med off and on as I was joining HP, Hewlett Packard. And then HP was gracious enough to pay my full ride to Stanford for industrial engineering for graduate work there. And I worked at HP for 29 years. So,
Did you find it hard going back to school? Like you went back to school, to Stanford. Was it hard getting back in a classroom?
you know, honestly, not really. It was very hard for me to leave Club Med. I still maintain it was the most difficult thing I ever did. Leaving all the admiration, leaving such a wonderful place. But I knew it was important for me for meeting my life goals. And I had also felt like I had such a great experience at Club Med that I was really ready to get back to schoolwork. So, I mean, I certainly did
Really?
miss the fun. Yeah, I missed the fun in the sun sort of feeling, and all the physicality. But at the same time, I was ready to be intellectually challenged again. I felt so lucky to be able to go to those schools and in the end to have HP pay for so much of it.
Well, yeah. Kudos to
Yeah.
them, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's pretty awesome.
exactly. Yeah,
well,
exactly.
well, let's go back now to, I guess, to where you first heard about Club Ed. Like, did you ever go as a kid with the parents or
Oh
anything? Or
no. I mean, I didn't grow up in that type of family where we were flying to vacations at all. I found out I was a human sex TA my senior year at UC Irvine, and one of the women in my section approached me about half the way through the quarter and said, "My brother works at Club Med. You should work at Club Med. You would be great." And that was the first time I'd ever heard about it. And so, I mean, this was back in the day. I went to a travel agent, I got brochures, I got things about Club Med. And after reading that stuff, I was like, oh my God, I have got to do this. Probably like you, Greg, when you first found out about it. It was an overwhelming feeling of this is what I want to do.
how did you apply? Because back then, even in my day in '94, it was pretty secretive. So, how did you find out where to send your resume to?
Yeah, it was so that woman's brother, I was trading basically postcards with him. He was a village, right? This was, you couldn't just call a village, it was exorbitantly expensive. So we were just sending kind of postcards and letters back and forth. And he said, send an application to Debbie Brokey, I think might have been the last name, something like that, in New York, and include your photo and resume. And so I did that. And then, as you mentioned in the intro, I got it sent back to me. We're not interested. Thank you very much. Oh, this is pretty devastating. So I continued to stay in contact with that guy. And eventually I talked to him on the phone because he was between seasons, he was on vacation. And I just happened to call him and he said, "Oh man, that's too bad. because I was just in LA yesterday interviewing people for Club Med. And if I'd known you were around, I could have let you know about it. Sorry. And so I hung up the phone and I picked up the phone and I called my boss at the waiting tables job I had and said, I'm not going to be able to make it to work tomorrow. And then I drove to the hotel that he told me where those interviews were taking place. And I had asked him, are they interviewing tomorrow? And he said, I don't know. And I just went to that hotel in Los Angeles, which is like an hour and a half, 2 hours, thankfully, from where I was living in Orange County. And I showed up and I saw young people congregating and I followed them to a suite and they showed a video about Club Med and they started calling people's names and they had folders, folder for each person. And I went up to the woman who was calling names and giving out folders and I said, Hi, I'm Brian Cargille. I got a call from New York yesterday and they told me to come down here and to tell you that you wouldn't have a file on me, but you should go ahead and interview me anyway.
Really?
That is straight up what happened.
Wow.
And this woman looked at me right in the eyes and she said, Sounds good. Here's a file. You're the last interview of the day. And of course, I mean, she knew what was happening, right? But she respected it. And so I was immensely fortunate. I got the last interview for the last day in Los Angeles, which was the last city they were visiting to recruit, which is a very powerful position. I mean, you have the full latency effect, right? And that's how I got the job. I mean, it wasn't that much longer after that that they said, we're sending you to Paradise first for a little while and then Eleuthera.
I guess like me, you were probably anxious or you were willing to do anything just to get your foot in the door. So did the topic of snorkel and picnic ever come up, or they just said, you know what, can you do this? This is where we're sending you, or did you ask to do this?
I asked to do snorkeling and picnic, Greg. I wasn't qualified to do much at all,
Okay.
quite frankly. I
Okay.
mean, my French was almost non-existent, right? I mean, I think I had like maybe a water safety instructor certification, but I couldn't water ski, I couldn't sail. I wanted to be on the sports team. I had a lot of experience organizing large groups at summer orientation for UC Irvine, groups of undergrads and their parents. And I talked to this, the brother of this woman who I had met in that section. And he was like, well, snorkeling picnic is the best. So see if you can get it.
Okay.
uh,
Yeah.
and so that was it. Right. And,
Yeah, snorkel picnic in the 80s. Yeah, we're gonna have to tread carefully here. Yeah, so they sent you to Paradise. So do you remember anything about arriving the first day or your first week? Or just tell me
oh
maybe
my
what
God,
what you do when
Greg,
you
I'm
go there.
sure I don't know what your growing up was like. I certainly had a, good family, childhood. We didn't have a lot of money, but I had never been to such a beautiful place in my life. I was just blown away. The buildings, the palm trees, right. And the food. Oh my God. There's so much fruit. I mean, so much unlimited, healthy food that I could have as much as I wanted. And then there was going to be another meal, 4 hours from now.
It's like
That,
it's like the freshman 15 all over again, almost, right? When you get there.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Except there's a gym and there's
Yeah.
all this athleticism and ocean swims. And I mean, I was taking people out in a boat and then hopping in the water and swimming back and forth in front of the reef. This was my gig. I couldn't believe it. I just really couldn't believe this was really happening to me. And then the chance to be on shows, right? Up in front of everybody and people applauding and working with all these international people who spoke all these different languages and had all these experiences. I felt incredibly lucky and incredibly naive all at the same time. And just this feeling of, oh my God, I just can't blow it. Right.
When,
I mean,
yeah.
this is great.
When you met your chief of village, Michel Delamare, did you actually know that was your boss? Like, were you aware of the hierarchy in the Club Med resorts at all? Because I was completely lost when I got there. I didn't know. Basically, everyone was my boss, but I didn't know there were that many bosses. Were you aware of this?
Yeah, because I saw him on stage and I was, like my first day and I was hanging out with other first season GOs. And somebody said, that's the chief of the village, and explained to me what that meant. So I got that, right? And I met my chief of sport, Eric, that first day too. And he was quite good. I mean, he was going to be a chief of the village very soon. And it was not his first rodeo at briefing new GOs. So he told me how those things work. When you mentioned that, I do remember that Michelle at that time had a very thick French accent. And one of the things that I really learned at at Club Med, was to train my ear to be able to understand people who are speaking English and have thick accents. And that served me so well over my life. Yeah, it may sound, I don't, it may sound maybe a little bit trite, but my ability to understand, my Spanish is pretty good, but my ability to understand people, whether they're, French nationals, Chinese nationals, whatever, when they're speaking with an accent is great. Yeah, anyway, that's what I remember about Michelle the first day I met him.
And do any stories or anecdotes come out of this season before we move on to your next? Like, I don't know, any first season mistakes? Any, I guess we're
Yeah.
spending that much time with GMs. You tell me.
Yeah. Well, I remember, Nassau was right across the water. That was incredible. The capital of the Bahamas. I remember when the chief of sports told me, hey, the most important team in Club Med is the sports team. We're the engine of the village. We create all the ambiance. If it wasn't for the sports team, Club Med would just be another hotel. And I thought, I don't think so. I mean, I didn't tell him that, but I mean, I think the kitchen team is the most important team. I did from the first day, and I still continue to believe. Well, I mean, of course, you need everybody on the team to make Club Med happen. But if the food isn't good, nobody's happy. So I remember that. And I also remember when I was taking over snorkeling, the the chief of snorkeling, we went out on the boat, and she's on the top of the boats, French woman, I mean, really good at her job. You could tell, right? Incredible GM contact. And she looks at me in the eyes and she says, so have you ever been outside the US? And I say, not really. She says, okay. And she takes off her t-shirt. It says, enjoy. And I didn't even know where to look.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I was like, wow, okay,
Yeah.
I am not in California, right?
No, yeah, we as I shared with you, we had the same experience our first season. Yes, I was completely flabbergasted too. And but she was French, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Very, very much
mine
so.
mine
Very
mine mine
French.
was American, so I didn't know what was going on. Okay. Are there, is there a camera on me? Is this a prank show? What is
Yeah,
this?
exactly.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a very sobering experience. Okay.
In a
Oh
good way.
Lord.
Yeah.
Yes, in a very good way.
Yeah.
Now, I believe your second season, I believe you wind up meeting someone we had on this show before, right? Mr. Stefan Cote.
For sure.
You crossed
Yes,
paths
absolutely.
in
Yeah, we were
Eleuthera.
in Eleuthera. Yeah. When that was the opening of trapeze
Oh, was it?
for Club Med. That was the first village that had trapeze.
Oh, wow. Okay. So kind of historic, right?
Yes, exactly. In 87. And I don't remember last name of that incredible trapeze guy who brought trapeze to Club Med. Of course, we had land circus before that, right? But he was incredible. He spent a lot of time with us there at Club Med. I was not on the circus team. I mean, I certainly, flew like everybody else, like a GM would, but that was a big deal. That was a big deal for Club Med.
Yeah, and this is your second trip to the Bahamas, and you're on the pink sand beach now of Eleuthera.
Exactly. Yeah, that fringing reef with all the turtles and the grouper and sharks. They had shark nets, so the big sharks wouldn't get through, but the smaller sharks and parrotfish and just swimming in schools of fish. And the pink sand beach where the sand was air conditioned, you remember that. It was gorgeous, just gorgeous. And we had the other side of the island, of course, was where scuba was and sailing and that's where we do the water ski show with the little shuttle bus that would go back and forth. It was a magical village. And you can still see if you get on the web, there's a video of Eleuthera after the hurricane, and it shows how the jungle has taken over, which is a good reminder that if you want to go to a Club Med, you better giddy up and go because you never know, you know, next
That's
year it
right.
might not be around, right?
That's right. That's right. And now, were the picnics like? Did you like Paradise? Did you have to take a boat somewhere to go to a smaller island, or how were they run in
Yes.
Eleuthera?
Yep. Very similar. We had a big picnic boat. We would take about 80 people. It was a big catamaran picnic boat. And it wasn't actually to another island. It was just to a different part of Eleuthera that was secluded. And it had a gorgeous beach where the level of the water just descended very, very slowly. So you would bring the boat up and anchor it, and then people would just walk down the gangplank and walk through this waist deep water that eventually became ankle deep water, and you get up to the picnic beach. So yeah, it was gorgeous. It was a great place for to have a picnic.
When you saw your first picnic, I assume the French G.O was the one teaching you in Paradise Island, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
where did you, after this season, when you were in Eleuthera, did you make up your own games at all, or did you just like stick to the script of what you learned in Paradise?
Well, I would say I never made up anything, Greg, but I benefited not just from her and other GOs, but all the GMs. I mean, most GMs in my experience have already been to Club Med. And so, like many GOs, one of the things I miss the most about Club Med is that every week you got to reinvent it, right? You could do more of what worked the previous week and do less of what didn't work. And I would hear about, oh, well, let's do this snorkel pass game, or let's do the caterpillar game, or the spin around the bat game, or, so I didn't create anything. But by the end, I had my own approach with different stretches. We would start out the picnic game by getting everybody in a circle and saying, as most picnic chiefs would say, cuckoo cha cha, and do our little dances and stretch out our hamstrings for bending over in the games and stretch out our livers in case anybody's, we didn't want anybody's liver to get sprained during the picnic. It was
What? Yeah, that's a good one. I haven't heard that one before. Uh, would
okay.
uh, would sangria be the because usually the picnic Geo has to make the whatever the jungle juice or sangria. Was it sangria you
Right.
guys were having? Was
It,
that?
yep, it was always sangria. We would get a big Rubbermaid
Yeah,
trash can,
yeah,
right?
that's right.
Night before, go back into the kitchen area. Of course, you make friends with everybody working in the kitchen. The economa's got to be a friend of yours, or you're not going to have a good season if you're the picnic chief. And you open two cases of wine, one white, one red, two magnums of rum, maybe some brandy if you can get your hands on it. You throw in a whole bunch of fruit and sugar to raise the pH level so that it takes effect a little bit more quickly. And then some spices and nutmeg, and that's your sangria. And you don't put ice in it the night before, right? You put it in the giant cold buffet fridge. And then when you get to the island, that's when you put the ice in so it doesn't dilute. And
But
then usually you would take a keg too,
yeah, I had no idea that. I mean, I had to make it in Martinique, but I had no idea that's what the sugar was for. Is that right? Okay. I
That's
used
what
to
I'd
put about
always heard.
I used to put two
Yeah.
pounds of sugar in that darn thing. Okay.
Everybody likes it if it's sweet.
Did you stir it with a big oar after? Because that's how I
I
did
didn't.
mine. Okay.
I don't remember what I stirred it
Okay.
with. Maybe like a piece of bamboo or something.
Okay.
That's a great question. And then as I think about it, I mean, you have experience with this too, Greg, but I can't even remember. How did I must have moved it in a golf cart, but how did we get that giant trash can full of sangria onto the picnic boat and then from the boat onto the beach
Uh,
without spilling any of it,
well, in my
right?
case, I'll tell you, I had to make it there. So when we hit the beach and the guests would go in the water, "Oh, here's this place," and then I had to start making it. So by 10 o'clock I was already done. But yeah, we would make it right there. Probably that's probably the
Oh,
reason why in the past they said, you know what, we're doing this backwards. This thing is darn heavy. Why wouldn't we just make it there? Okay, which is what we did.
see, finally, yeah. See, that's something I didn't learn. That's something I didn't learn.
Yeah,
But it does remind me, Greg. This story is that
yeah.
I remember I had chief of sport. So this was actually in Turquoise, but since you bring up the picnic, the economo in Turquoise, I mean, he did a great job for us, but he wasn't the biggest fan of the picnic. Not like he was against it, but he's like, Brian comes back here and he makes the sangria, and I have to do this extra cold buffet stuff and everything. And my boss knew about this. He didn't have a problem with me. He just wasn't the biggest fan of the picnic. And so Steve Miller, who was my chief of sport, he goes to the economo and he says, "Hey, Bruno, I'm just curious. Do you think it costs more money for people to go on the picnic or for people to stay in the village?" "I don't know." And this completely changed the economist's view because the economist did a little bit of analysis and he figured out it's way cheaper for people to go on the picnic because the quality of the food that they eat, just, they're eating hamburgers and chops and cold salad and stuff. They're not having the most expensive desserts and the most expensive fish and all this stuff. And yeah, we're having sangria, but it's really, the sangria really isn't that expensive. So as soon as the economist found this out, he completely changed his mind. He's like, "I love the picnic. We should have 2 picnics a week. Brian's my favorite GO."
Yeah. And you're like, whoa, whoa, two. Okay, hold on.
This
Okay.
is awesome. Yeah, right. And so then he started sending 1 or 2 chefs with us on the picnic, Greg. And the chefs were dressed like they would wear their kitchen stuff with the giant kitchen hat. And now I don't even have to cook on the picnic. And the GMs are just totally stoked, right? Because they have somebody who knows what they're doing with the food. Everybody's happy. And that showed me, again, it may sound trite, but it's so important to understand in business, in any team, how somebody is measured. Because if you understand that, then you can, it helps you to work with them and see things from their view. It was just that one question from Steve that changed everything in the economist's mind.
Now, when you go to Sandpiper winter 87, 88 or thereabouts, did you request, like, do they give you a dream sheet back then, or that's just where they needed you?
Yeah, they needed me badly in Sandpiper. I had asked to go to Sonora Bay because I love the desert. And honestly, I saw that village in Sonora Bay, which I did end up going to, with Jay Spangler when he was there in a season. I didn't think Sonora Bay was going to be there forever because I felt like it was a very special place. But Michelle said, they really need you in Sandpiper, Brian. They need the animation, they need your energy. And so I really want you to go. And I agreed.
What was the designation? Was it the family village? Like always a
Oh,
family
yeah,
village? Yes. Okay.
it was definitely a family village. And
But
it was, go ahead. I'm sorry.
but no kids on the picnic, right? I'm guessing it was like
No,
adults.
no, no kids on the
Okay.
picnic.
Okay.
And it was full back then. It was very interesting because it was I mean, almost all the GMs, 95% were European. They were French and Italian mainly, some German GMs who were coming to go to Disney World and to stay at Club Med. And so it was really interesting to be at this American village where almost all the GMs were European. I remember we had Sergio Tacchini and his sales force, Tacchini Sportswear. This was a big sportswear company in the 80s. He brought his whole sales force to Club Med Sandpiper, took over the village, right? All the GMs are Italian, 100%, and their families. And we had to change everything about the program because, like, pasta had to be served at every meal, and the GMs wouldn't come to the game unless it had something to do with soccer. So we had soccer tennis, soccer football, soccer. I mean, it was and we played practical jokes on all of the executives for Sergio Tacchini. But it was just a very different feeling to be an American hearing French and Italian all the time.
And I guess for you doing 2 seasons in the Bahamas, so you're back on the mainland, quote unquote. I guess it was a different feel for you, right?
It was then really a golf and tennis club, right? Which had boat rides and picnics to some extent, right? But it was mainly golf and tennis. And I think we had 3 18-hole golf courses at that time, right? And we had Marcus come to run the tennis program. And that was the beginning of the intensive tennis for Club Med. And oh my goodness, this was when we were first starting to videotape GMs like with their serve playing tennis. Now it's like, of course we do that. How are you going to get better if you can't see how you're serving, right? But that was a big deal. And Marcus, an incredible tennis player. The other things about Sandpiper, especially at that time, back in the Bahamas and especially in Turquoise, you would get a container of food once a month, right? And that was the container that the Economy got. And if you burned through all the bananas, that's it. You don't have any more bananas, right? In Port St. Lucie, you can get any food you want. You thought the food was good in the Bahamas. Oh my God. I mean, the food in Sandpiper was off the charts. And of course, again, I had all the kitchen team was friends of mine. I was having egg white omelets with smoked salmon for breakfast every day of the week. It was incredible. And yeah, and the golf was really big. One of the other things I remember from that season was we had a very slow week, and the chief of sport said to me, Brian, I think you can think of something to, something different. And so we organized a rowboat race. We had 8 metal rowboats and we made a trifecta. You know it. You remember the trifectas, Greg, for sure, right?
Well, can you just refresh my memory? What is it?
Oh, sure. No, of course. So all the GM, so you put up a big sign at the entrance to the restaurant with the names of the different teams that are going to be competing in the rowboat race or the windsurfing race or whatever. And the GMs bet on who's going to be first, second, and third. And they're not betting any money. They're just like, here's who I think is going to win. And they put in their ticket and they keep their stub. And then if the GM gets first, second, and third, whichever GMs get it correct, they win bottles of champagne, which is a big deal back then because alcohol is not included and the champagne is good. And it gets the whole village out to watch the trifecta. Yeah, I mean, because that was back in the day with beads, right? We were paying for drinks with beads, brown beads, yellow, orange, gold beads. So I put up a sign in front of the restaurant and we assigned teams, right? I had the Mexican team, the French team, the Italian team, the American team, and I populated these teams with 2 GOs per team. So like Steve Miller and I think Mike from Water Ski was one team, and then Drew Miller, chief hostess, and somebody else, and Kitsy Mager was on one of the teams. Okay, and we get all now we have 300 GMs down there and all the GOs, and the gun goes off, and the rowboats go into the water. Greg, these are GOs. They're the most competitive people on the planet. And I have never seen anything like this. It was immediately a war. So GS is just incredible. So Irv from the golfing Irv and John jump out of their rowboat, swim to another rowboat, pull out the drainage plug of that rowboat, toss the drainage plug overboard, and muscle the oars out of the other GO's hands, throw the oars overboard, jump back in the water, swim to their rowboat, and keep going. And I mean, it was just fantastic. There were no injuries. And after that happened, the chief of the village came to me and said, that was great. We're never doing it again. Yeah. It's just too dangerous, Brian.
Yeah, what should have been a nice, calm, tranquil rowboat race turned into Thunderdome, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. If they could have lit things on fire, they would have.
Okay. Right? Okay. Sounds very Lord of the Flies, but okay.
Exactly.
Now you were kind enough to supply me with some stories. I just don't know when they occur. Now, when during one of your picnics, you found a woman's engagement ring. Was it at Sandpiper, or we haven't gotten to it yet?
No, haven't gotten to it. That was in Turquoise.
Yeah. Okay. So, which leads us to, after Sandpiper, you get to Turquoise, which, correct me if I'm wrong, you were there in summer '88, but it wasn't that long that village had opened, right? Like
exactly.
It opened not long after you were there, and this is you're back with Michel Delamar, the chief of village.
Yes.
I guess you're finally, well, I don't know if Paradise and Eleuthera were considered adult villages back then, but I guess Turquoise would be probably the biggest singles resort you'd been to up until that point, correct?
Oh, for sure. For sure. And Turquoise back then, Greg, was, I think from many people's view, that was the nicest village that we had. I mean, remember, this is a long time ago when the rooms in Paradise were small and a little bit dark because you didn't go to Club Med for the rooms, right? And Turquoise was luxe. and we had every sport, right? We opened scuba that summer. We hadn't had scuba, but we had the scuba opening in '88. We didn't have circus yet. Okay, so we didn't have circus, but we had water ski, we had windsurfing, we had sailing, we had tennis, right? And the island, the Club Med was basically the only thing on the island. And so we open scuba, snorkeling has been going on. The reef is pristine. There's lobster everywhere, right? Just lobster just running around because nobody's been grabbing them and eating them. It was a very, very special. I mean, turquoise is still beautiful, but it was a very special time.
And speaking
Uh,
of a lobster, Brian, was Jojo around at
yes, he
this point? He
was.
was, okay.
Yes, yes, for sure. Yes.
And did you encounter him on a snorkel excursion?
He was around frequently. He would follow the boat around, not every time, but he would follow the boat around when we'd go out to, take people to the reef. And if you were giving a scuba lesson, sometimes you would, like, let's say you were just off the shore, giving a scuba lesson, and you have people in maybe 15 feet of water, and you're sitting on the bottom, sitting on the sand, and you're doing exercises like remove your reg, put your reg back in. Jojo would sneak up to you in the circle and come up to someone, usually a woman, come up to a woman and try to edge the woman out of the circle
Yeah.
to like
That's crazy, right? Like 7 years later, he was still doing that my first season in Turks. This is crazy. Like how a dolphin just enjoys the same game for like 7 years in a row.
it was just, yeah. I mean, and that he wasn't going to be in his pod. He preferred to hang out with us,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And he was, and I mean, that for many of the GMs, I mean, JoJo wasn't my favorite. I didn't have a problem with Joe. We just had to control him, keep the GMs safe. But for some of the GMs, that's just where it was at. The Dolphin made that village. And you can imagine if you're coming from one of the boroughs of New York and you don't have that much experience in the ocean and you show up and there's a dolphin splashing around right next to you while you're in a snorkeling
Well,
lesson.
yeah,
It's a
yeah,
big deal.
wild. Like you might have only seen them in SeaWorld. So yeah, that's why it was so like mind blowing for me. I got to swim with them for 6 months because otherwise I'd only seen them in an aquarium or a tank. You know what I mean? So and
Yeah,
have
yeah,
them
yeah.
so friendly. Also, well, you had to get to know him first, but he did bite the occasional person who
Yeah, if a GM puts their thumb down his
yeah,
blowhole, yeah,
exactly,
for
exactly.
example,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
The one
yeah,
place you shouldn't touch a dolphin, people. But yeah, okay.
yes, exactly. Yeah.
So tell me, because I do like a good celebrity encounter. So apparently Brooke Shields comes here with her boyfriend. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This was fantastic. So it was about two-thirds of the way through the season, and the chief of the village tells us at the weekly GO meeting, hey, Brooke Shields is going to be here with her boyfriend. Just get your mind right. You're going to treat her like every other GM. You're not going to treat her better. You're not going to ask for her autograph. You're not going to stare at her, let her have her vacation. And so she showed up with her boyfriend, and these people were just some of the highest quality people I've ever met in my life, Greg. I mean, they were funny and smart and so nice. And Brooke did not come on the picnic, but her boyfriend did, and they just had a wonderful time. And I don't know. Well, definitely the chief of the village still
So can
has the
I
photo.
just
Yeah,
ask a question, Brian? Like I don't know if
yeah,
you remember, but would this have been Dean Cain, TV's Superman? Because I know they were an item for about 3 years.
I
Do you
think so.
recall? Okay, yeah,
I,
very
I'm not
obviously
really.
very okay.
Yeah,
Okay, very
I think so.
good looking
He
guy. He looks
certainly
like
looked like
Superman.
Superman.
Okay,
He
yeah, just
certainly looked like
okay.
Superman.
I'm sorry, I was just curious. Yeah.
No, no, no. Yeah, I'm not the best at pop culture, but I mean, whether he was or not, he certainly looked like Superman. And I remember that after the picnic, you know, Ms. Shields and her boyfriend and I are hanging out by the pool. Her boyfriend and I have our shirts off, Brooks in a bathing suit, and a couple of my colleague GO women on the sports team, come over and we're just kind of, talking about the picnic or whatever practical joke we're going to play on somebody later. And one of my I look over and my GO colleague is just staring at this guy with her jaw open, just like,
Yeah. So Michelle Delamar should have told the female GOs not to stare at her boyfriend too, right? In those instructions, I'm gathering.
exactly. And one of my proudest moments of my life is I looked at her and I just put my fingers just under her jaw, just kind of, just quietly telling her to shut her mouth. And she looked at me and said, "Thanks, Brian."
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's Dean Cain at this point. Yeah, that would probably
Yeah,
be
that probably.
the
Yeah.
guy, yeah, that would
Yeah.
cause that commotion in a village. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned the engagement ring story. I
Yes.
remember at a picnic, we're in the picnic, games are going on, people are having the time of their lives, and somebody comes up to me and says, "Brian, a GM, somebody stole my wife's engagement ring." And I'm like, okay. And I said, "Patricia, can you take over the games, please?" And so I walked with him and I said, "Tell me more." And we walk over to this towel where he and his wife had been sitting, and he said, "Well, she put her ring right here during the games on the towel, and now it's gone." And I was like, life choices. That might not have been the best life choice to put, your engagement ring on the towel next to the sand during the Club Med picnic. But I said, okay. And I put my hand into the sand. I grabbed some sand and shook my hand and I pulled up, and the engagement ring was in the palm of my hand. Oh, that was a good day that we found
Nice.
the
Very
engagement ring.
nice save. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
talk about a needle in a haystack find, too.
that was very, very lucky. That was very, very lucky. This was also the time when we used to play jokes on each other all the time, Greg. One of my favorite, the kitchen team was so good that season. We would do every week lobster bisque soup. And I'm sure you've done this, right? But you would have the one day of the week, you'd have the inside the restaurant, as soon as you go in, a table with a big pot on the table and a tablecloth, red tablecloth, and bowls and a big ladle. And the GMs would come up and you would say, "Would you like some lobster bisque soup?" And they'd say, "Sure." And the GMs wouldn't notice that it was usually a sports team GO serving the soup. How odd. You take the lid off and you start to go in with your ladle. And then another one of the sports team GOs, covered in red makeup, dressed their head like a lobster, chops out of the pot and says, and freaks the GM out. This was so much fun. And we would score how well we had done by how many bowls got broken that night from people dropping the bowls.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So just, I mean, lots of different fun things like that. Steve Riley was my roommate
Oh, really?
in Turquoise. Yes, he was my roommate. He was land sports GO. And as eventually became chief of sports and then chief of the village.
That's right.
Yeah. And so those were good times. I remember one day I was coming back to the bar, after my service and showering and everything. Steve was standing at the bar with Michelle, and he motioned to me to come over. And he said, "Brian, I was just telling Michelle how great it is to be your roommate." And I said, "Oh, well, okay, that's nice. Any particular reason?" And he looked at me and he said, "Maybe you should think about what happened today." And then I remembered that earlier in the day, it was an arrival day, so it was a Saturday. A couple young women GMs, I don't know, mid 20s, were at the hostess station talking to somebody who reported to Drew, or maybe it was Drew, and saying, "There's no hot water in Florina. We can't take a shower. We just got off the plane." And I happened to be walking by and I said, "Oh, you could take a shower in my room." And they looked at me and they said, "What?" And I said, "Well, I'm in Marina. I'm sure there's hot water in Marina. You want to take a shower in my room? It's fine." And they're like, "Great." And I said, "Okay, let's go." So we walked over there and I opened up the room, and I didn't even think anything about it. I'm like, "Go ahead, just lock the door when you leave, please. And if you need to get back in, here's where the key lives. It's up on this pillar here." And then I went off to my service or whatever, and I didn't even think about it. Well, Steve had come back from some land sports tournament, and there was one woman in the shower, and another woman was toweling off in our bathroom. And he was like, "I love this village and being Brian's roommate. This is great."
Yeah.
So So yeah, so that was good. And we had lots of we had lots of iguanas at the picnic. And I remember after getting approval that from the chief of the village that he let me release iguanas backstage during Peri Panache right before the show started. I released 3 iguanas backstage in the dressing room. That created a lot of fun that night. I did get approval from the chief of the village before I did it, so that
Wait,
was good.
excuse me, Brian. This was for a practical joke, you mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, got
yeah.
it.
Just we captured the iguanas on the during the picnic, and then in volleyball nets, and brought them back, and then just released them in backstage. Like there isn't enough entropy backstage, Greg, before a show, before the
Yeah,
biggest show of the week.
that's right. Yeah.
We just thought more iguanas would be great
Yeah.
back there.
Yeah. People's
Uh,
anxiety levels are already at all-time lows.
exactly.
What's an
Half
eight count? What's
dressed.
an eight count? What's a pas de bourrée? What the hell? Help! That was usually me. What do I do with my arms? Okay.
Come on. I'm sure you were great at the shows,
Oh
Greg.
god. Oh god. No.
Um,
No. I was back by the.
uh,
I was back by the curtain. Okay.
but now, if you go to Turquoise, prior to the summer of '88, there were never iguanas living in the village. But there are still iguanas there. I mean, I was just there a couple of years ago. There are iguanas living. All those iguanas are descended from the iguanas that we released backstage that night.
Nice.
Yeah. So the history, the circle of life.
Okay, so after Turquoise, I guess this is where you take your break and go to grad school. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Then you go to Sonora Bay. So summer 91. Now you're doing sailing, windsurfing. I never worked Sonora, but I did go there. And I think we both shared a passion and interest for scuba diving. And one of the most unique dives I'm sure that you've had in your life is did you get a chance to either dive, snorkel with the sea lions there?
Oh, both. But the diving with them was great. And you know as well or better than I do, Greg. I mean, that was just incredible, right? I mean, the pups swimming around right up into your face, swimming, literally swimming circles around you, the bulls, the adult sea lions just hopping off the rocks into the water just to go hang out with you. I'd never had anything like it. And I've had some great dives all over the world. So
And yeah, and you finally get to Sonora. That was one of your dreams. And you mentioned earlier about villages closing. So I believe like 4 of the 5 villages you worked at are no longer like, well, Club Med villages at any rate, right? Paradise Island, Eleuthera,
totally.
Sandpiper, and
Yeah.
Sonora Bay.
Yes.
Yep.
And that doesn't even count all the ones I've been to as a GM that are
Yeah,
closed.
exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
Haiti, Playa Blanca. I mean,
yeah.
the list goes on and on.
And now sailing, windsurfing. So did you? I guess you learned that back in California, or you learned this in Club Med?
Oh, I learned it in Club Med, but I was never great, right? And
Okay.
I mean, I had great GM contact. And I sure I can sail a laser, right? I'm not a good windsurfer.
Yeah.
And I was au pair. I was just helping out. I was there with Jay Spangler, who was on the ski team and then eventually became chief of ski. What a magical village that was, as you know, Greg. I mean, there's something just really special about that place.
Oh yeah, the mountains surrounding that. Me too. I like the desert, and you have those beautiful mountains surrounding it, and the cacti everywhere. The horseback riding. I don't know if you got a chance to do one of the excursions on horseback or anything, but
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. I'm actually allergic to horses, so I didn't do
oh
much of
really?
that.
Okay,
Yes, I'm
okay,
allergic to horses, but I had to do a little bit of it. And I mean, for me also, Guaymas, the weather changed so dramatically. By the end of the season, I'm sure you guys had blankets watching the show,
oh
like
yeah,
many people, right?
nighttime. Yeah, it kind of drops a little there, huh?
Yeah,
That big
yeah,
fireplace, I guess, there for a reason at the
totally.
at center of the
But those
village.
super, super hot days, and then you jump in the Sea of Cortez and just it's fantastic. So
Yeah, you're right. Could take a moment here to do some shout outs, if you will. Like I know you mentioned some
sure.
names, also like Jay Spangler and everyone. Is there anyone that we haven't shouted out yet that you enjoyed working with?
Oh, sure. So besides the folks we already talked about, I would say Michelle Delamar's children, and his wife. So Greg and Leslie and Christine were a big part of village life in the summer times. Patricia Legat, who was chief of tennis in Turquoise. She also worked Paradise. She was such a great tennis player and such great GM contact. And then Kitsy Mauger with fantastic at the shows. Steve Schwartz, and also great aerobics instructor. Steve Schwartz diving, Steve Riley, I talked about. Sue's shows. I'm sorry that I don't remember Sue's name, but the best shows ever were put on by Sue in Turquoise of '88. And most of these people were part of that Turquoise '88 season. And people talk about dream teams. For me, the question is, what do the GMs think? And my understanding is that Turquoise still has the highest GM notes of any season. Now that might not be true, but that's my understanding that the GM notes there were just off the charts.
And I guess this was done by like a feedback. The GMs would get mailed something, and is that how they
Right,
evaluated notes?
yeah, like right after you come home from Club Med. In fact, most people, at least back then, when they returned home, there was something from Club Med where they said how much they liked it or they didn't like it. So,
Okay, wow, nice. Let me ask you, is there a season in particular that maybe you thought of as magical? I mean, I use the word magical. You could have liked them for all different reasons, but is there one that stood out as like wow,
yeah,
this?
I would say again, it was that summer '88 in Turquoise. And if you ask Michelle, who's worked for the club for how many years and did how many seasons, he would. I bet you he would say for sure that was his best season. It was everything, the team, the GMs, the island itself being so much pristine, right? So much things that were unspoiled. It was just wonderful. Now I'll also say that I still love Club Med, and we go. I've been to 25
Well, yeah,
clubs.
that kind of ruins my next question for you because since you've been attending so many and for so many years, like I normally ask, is there anything you miss? But is since you still go, is there anything that you miss, or maybe I should say miss working as a GO?
Well, the big thing I miss is being admired, Greg.
Yeah, guilty.
I mean, come
Yeah,
on,
yeah,
right?
yeah. You could, yeah. The real world's not what it's cut out to be, people. Okay.
But I mean, 600 new people every week, just
Yeah,
all that admiration, whether you're on stage or just around the village.
yeah.
I mean, it's like a drug,
Yeah,
you know?
right. Yeah, I always said I always said in some ways we're like very minor celebrities. I always said that, like they come to the village, the GO is the celebrity, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's how I equated it anyway, like with celebrity life, because they talk about you like that, Oh, did you see what Brian did at the picnic? What a crazy guy, or there he is on stage again. He's dancing the can. How does he do that?
Exactly right. Exactly right. That's a really good, I've never heard that terminology, Greg, but that's a really good way to frame it,
Yeah, because everyone
you
wants your
know?
photo. They're always like, can you just a sec? Can you take a photo with my wife? I mean, that's all.
Oh, and that, I mean, recapturing some of the spirit, Greg, one of my favorite things to do now as a GM, because so many of us working there know that everybody wants a photo with us. One of my favorite things to do is we get a bucket, put a whole bunch of ice in it, put some water in it, get the water ice cold, and then have my wife or one of my other friends that we're traveling with as GMs go to the GO with the highest self-admiration index in the village and say, "Hey, everybody wants to get a photo with you." And
Wait
of
a sec.
course,
Wait a sec. I have to laughing at this self admiration index.
high
Okay, so
self-admiration
that's a
index.
good one. Thank you. I haven't heard that one before. Okay.
Yeah, okay. And I mean, the higher the self-admiration index, the more you're willing to believe that everybody wants a photo with you, right?
Yeah, that's why
And
I've
so
got so
then,
many ice buckets. Okay.
yeah, exactly. And so then you get 12 or 14 people around, and you have Marty Gerke, who's a dear friend of mine, who I think you also know,
Shout out
fantastic
Marty.
GM.
Yep. Good
Yes,
photographer,
fantastic
videographer.
GM.
Yep.
Yeah. He's on the camera and he's like, okay, everybody get together. And then right at the key moment, I put a giant bucket of ice water on that GO who has the high self-admiration index.
Well,
So much joy
while
is
making
created
sure
from
they don't have
this.
a walkie-talkie, though, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I mean, when we were in La Fidel, we did this every other day for 2 weeks. And people are just like, at the end, they're like, I don't want to get a photo with you. I know you're just going to do the ice bucket. And
That's right.
then one of my friends will say, no, that's not true. We just want a photo with
Yeah,
you.
that's right. It's
And they're like,
boy who cried wolf now, right? Now you when you genuinely like the person, they're like, no, 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 I don't want to get doused with water and ice, right?
yeah, exactly. But they still believe everybody wants a photo. And so in the end, they still get the ice. But
Nice.
yeah. And for me, it's not only the GOs. I mean, all the GMs, right? All the dear friends that we've met at Club Med, Catherine Tooman, for example, Margaret Satchel, who we go to Club Med with, Karen Hanner, Edie Lush, all these GMs that go every year to Club Med. I mean, that's as much a part of the magic as the GOs.
Have you?
And
Sorry, excuse me, Brian. Sorry, have you gone to any of the reunions, the XGO reunions? Have you been to
yeah,
any yet? You
yes, I
have.
have. I've been in Turquoise,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been a while in
Okay.
Cancun. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I did two in
Um,
Cancun. I was just curious if you were there in 2008 or 2010. So those were the two I attended. It's just out of curiosity. If you.
I don't know. I don't think I was there in 2008. We were living in Singapore.
Okay, that's
Um,
right. Yeah, with
yeah,
your crew.
2010. I'm not sure. Sorry, it all blends
Oh
together,
no, it's
sir.
okay. I was just curious, like
Yeah.
for someone that goes a lot, if you'd ever attended a reunion and met some old friends.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And in fact, we had a mini reunion just with, Michelle Delamar's son and his son's family and Stephen Drew Miller and me up at their house in Lake Stevens, just, in
Oh really?
yeah, during
Okay,
the
so
summer.
so Michelle's kids are living in the States, I guess.
No, they live in France and they
Okay,
just came out for good times, for the
okay.
water skiing and the surfing.
Oh, nice. Still Club Med kids, huh?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Let me ask you one. Maybe you got time for one quick story. I would like to know your
Sure.
your can story with was it
Oh,
Kitsy?
Kitsy. Yeah, no, the Can story is that we're in the Can. It's a big show of the week. And the Can, you enter from the women enter from stage left and the guys enter from stage right, and the Can. Da, 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 da. Okay. So was Kitsy's dance partner, which is great because she's fantastic dancer. And I had been in an earlier number, and then I went backstage and I was hanging out with the costumier in the very back of the stage at Turquoise and just talking about something or planning some practical joke on somebody or whatever. And we're talking, and I was dressed for the number. And then I hear da, da, which is the opening bars of the Can song. And I was, Greg, far away from the stage at this point. Okay. And so I ran flat out as fast as I could out to stage right. And Kitsy is there waiting for me on the other side of the stage. And I just didn't break my stride and I hit my mark and we pulled off the can, all four couples on time. So that's a story about you need to pay attention to what you're doing and be professional. Okay,
That's right.
Brian. I mean, everybody does all this stuff for the show, and I can't bother to be in place on time. And Kitsy's looking across and she's like, well, the show must go on. I guess if Brian doesn't come, I'm just doing it without a partner. So that's my can story.
Okay, sir, we're coming near the end of our time together, and just this is the part where they ask you, did we forget to talk about anything or mention or shout out anyone? Now is the time, and I'm curious, did we get everyone, or there's someone we left out?
Well, I mean, the person you can never forget is Danielle Spangler, right? I mean, she's married to Jay Spangler. Probably when she got hired to work at Club Med, she was the most overqualified GO in the history of the world. Her
Really?
maiden name, oh yeah, her maiden name is Noblit. It's Daniel Noblit. She had degrees in kinesiology. She was certified in every exercise format. She literally wrote the book on postpartum fitness for women, after they've had a child. Unbelievably qualified person and was the aerobics instructor for multiple seasons. Now, of course, she owns a boutique fitness club with her husband Jay. They also own the Pura Vida restaurants in Southern California, which are unbelievable vegan Italian restaurants. But yeah, what a contribution! And I mean, I saw Danielle several weeks ago, and I complained to her about a torn quadricep, and she was like, "Oh." You need to do this and this and this and this. And she was exactly right. Right. And I started doing those things. And now my quad is just really not bothering me anymore. And it's just one example, Greg. And I'm sure you've got tons of them of this super high quality people that you meet and you get to have in your life because you were part of Club Med. This is fantastic.
Excellent. All right. And now with all the years you spent in Club Med, Brian, I don't know if if you thought about this, but maybe you have. Is there anything that you learned in Club Med that helped you at HP since you spent a number of years at HP?
Yeah, 29 years. Absolutely. My whole career. At the end, I had 2,500 people working for me at HP and teams all over the world. And one of the things Club Med taught me was that other people's cultures, other people's cultural beliefs are as legit as mine. And so red envelopes for Chinese New Year in Singapore or China are as important
Yep.
as remembering that it's the 4th of July and not scheduling a meeting on the 4th of July with people in the US, right? And just really getting that and leaning into that. When I was an exec, I gave red envelopes to everybody who was on my staff, everybody who worked for me. And this engendered so much respect and loyalty just just because I did it. And I learned all of that at Club Med. That, and I mean, another side of that same coin is learning how to read people and understand what motivates them so that you're really training your EQ as well as your IQ, right? And helping people very quickly to feel part of the team and to feel like their work really matters, Greg, because you can't do it unless you've got the whole team behind you. Yeah, so those are big, big lessons for me.
Excellent. Wow. This has been such an amazing time. And before I forget, I really do want to thank you for sharing your story with us, Brian. It was very, very kind of you to reach out to me and then agree to all my silly rules and still want to do it. So it means the world to me. So thanks so much for this.
Oh, not at all, Greg. Very professional, I'll shout out to you that I know because I've heard from other people, a lot of people just really enjoy this podcast, and that it helps us all remember what a great privilege it was to have that Club Med experience and how grateful we all are for each other and also for all the GMs that go to Club Med that make it possible. Because without the GMs, there is no Club Med, right?
Well said.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good, sir. Well, yeah. And if anyone's listening, like Brian, if any Brian's friends are listening, if you want to come on, it's just that easy, reach out to me. Okay. It's, I do get turned down a lot, like I say, just like back at Club Med, but so I'm grateful for people.
I hadn't heard that one good.
Thank you. So yeah, it's nice when you reach out to me. That means I know you really want to do it. So yeah, if you're friends of Brian, work with Brian, and you'd like to come on the show, no problem at all. Just send me a message somewhere, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever you can. And I do want to thank once again the one and only Brian Cargille. And Brian, if you would like to take us out and thank everyone for listening and shout out your friends, take it away, sir.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Hey, everybody who took the time to listen to my stories, thank you. And I appreciate all of yours, right? Every GM story, every GO story I've ever heard. Thank you for keeping this very special thing that is Club Med alive. And to every GO who I ever worked with, Stefan Cote, Steve Miller, Drew Miller, Jay Spangler, Danielle Spangler, Kitsy Mager, Patricia Legat, Steve Riley. Oh my God. So many names, such high quality people. Thanks for everything, you guys. Keep it rolling. And thank you, Greg.
No problem. My pleasure, Brian. Thank you. And we'll see you all next week with another new installment. Bye. Say bye, Brian.
Adios.